Hello friends. Did you know that nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy the content, I'd truly appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot. Also, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. Your interaction not only supports the channel's growth, but also helps these stories reach more people. Thank you all for being here. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. I've been driving long haul for close to 17 years now. I've seen plenty of things on these roads that would make your skin crawl if you thought about them too long. But there's one stretch of highway I will never, ever drive again, no matter how much they pay me, no matter how tight the deadline is. It's a section of I-80 through Wyoming, somewhere between Rock Springs and Rawlins. The company still tries to send me that route sometimes, and every single time I call dispatch and tell them I'm taking the long way around. They've stopped asking why. It happened in late October, 3 years back. I was hauling a load of industrial equipment from Salt Lake City to Omaha, one of those runs where you're racing against the clock because the customer needs the parts for a factory shutdown. The money was good, and I needed it. My daughter was starting college that spring, and every extra dollar helped. So when dispatch offered me the run with a tight deadline, I took it without thinking twice. The first leg went fine. I made good time through Utah and into Wyoming, stopped for fuel and a quick meal at a truck stop in Rock Springs around 7 in the evening. The weather forecast was calling for fog later that night, but nothing serious. Just typical fall conditions for that part of Wyoming. I'd driven through worse plenty of times. I got back on I-80 heading east around 8:30, just as the sun was setting. The highway through that part of Wyoming is pretty desolate. Long stretches of empty prairie and low hills, with maybe a ranch house visible every 10 or 15 miles. In the daylight, it's beautiful in a stark kind of way. At night, especially in bad weather, it can feel like you're driving through the loneliest place on earth. The fog started rolling in about 30 miles east of Rock Springs. At first, it was just wisps drifting across the highway, nothing to worry about. But within 20 minutes, it had gotten thick, really thick. The kind of fog where your headlights just bounce right back at you and you're lucky if you can see the white line on the road. I slowed down to about 40 miles an hour, which is crawling for a highway like I-80, but I wasn't taking any chances. My rig was carrying 42,000 pounds of equipment, and stopping distance in fog like that is no joke. The CB radio was pretty quiet. I had it tuned to channel 19, listening for other drivers who might have information about the fog ahead or warnings about accidents. Every now and then, I'd hear a brief exchange between truckers, but mostly it was just static. That's not unusual in bad weather. The fog can mess with radio signals, make everything sound distant and broken up. I'd been driving in the fog for maybe 45 minutes when I first noticed the mile marker. Mile 213. It was one of those green reflective signs on the right side of the highway, lit up by my headlights as I passed. I didn't think much of it at the time. Mile markers are just part of the landscape when you drive truck. You use them to track your progress, report locations to dispatch, estimate arrival times. But about 15 minutes later, I saw it again. Mile 213, same green reflective sign, same position on the right side of the highway. I figured I must have made a mistake, misread the first one. Maybe it had been 223 or 203, and I'd just gotten confused in the fog. My eyes were tired, and reading signs in thick fog can play tricks on you. I kept driving, watching my odometer. I'd gone another 8 miles according to the truck's computer when I saw the sign again. Mile 213. This time, I was paying attention. I slowed down even more, almost to a crawl, and stared at that sign as I passed it. Green, reflective letters and numbers. Mile 213. Interstate 80. No mistake. That's when I started to feel the first cold fingers of real fear working their way up my spine. I'd driven this route dozens of times. I knew for a fact that the mile markers went in order, one after another, west to east. There was no loop in the highway, no place where the road doubled back on itself. And yet I'd just passed the same mile marker 3 times. I grabbed my CB handset and called out on Channel 19. "This is Colorado Dale, eastbound on I-80 near mile marker 213. Is anybody else out here in this fog?" Nothing but static. I tried again, raising my voice a little. "Anybody on I-80 eastbound? I could use some traffic information." Still nothing. Not even the distant sound of another driver's conversation. Just empty static, like the radio was working, but there was nobody else out there to hear me. That was strange. I-80 is a major cross-country route. There should have been dozens of trucks within CB range, even at that time of night. I checked my phone. No signal. That wasn't unusual in this part of Wyoming. Cell coverage could be spotty in the rural areas, but combined with the dead CB radio and the repeating mile marker, it was starting to feel like I'd driven into some kind of dead zone. I kept going, watching the odometer carefully. 5 miles, 6 miles, 7 miles. And then there it was again. Mile 213. The same goddamn sign, in the same location, lit up by my headlights like it was mocking me. This time, I pulled over onto the shoulder, put on my hazard lights, and sat there with the engine idling. I needed to think. I needed to figure out what was happening. The logical part of my brain was trying to come up with explanations. Maybe the fog was so thick that I'd gotten turned around without realizing it. Maybe I'd somehow taken an exit and gotten on a loop road without noticing. Maybe I was having some kind of medical episode, a stroke or something that was affecting my perception. But I knew none of those explanations made sense. I'd been watching the road the whole time. There had been no exits, no intersections, no place where I could have turned around. The white lines on the highway had been solid and continuous. My truck's compass showed I was still heading east. And I felt fine, no symptoms of any kind of medical emergency. I sat there on the shoulder for maybe 10 minutes, watching the fog swirl in my headlights and trying to decide what to do. That's when I heard the voice on the CB radio. It was faint at first, almost lost in the static. A man's voice, or at least I thought it was a man. It was hard to tell because it sounded strange, distorted somehow. Not like bad reception, more like someone talking through water or from a great distance. "Mile 213, the voice said. Just those 2 words, barely audible. Mile 213. I grabbed the CB handset. "This is Colorado Dale on Channel 19. Who is this? What's your location?" The voice came back, still faint but a little clearer. "Mile 213. Mile 213. Mile 213. It was repeating the words like a chant, or like a recording stuck on a loop. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. There was something wrong about that voice, something that made every instinct I had scream at me to get out of there. "Who is this?" I asked again, trying to keep my voice steady. "What do you want?" The voice changed then. It got louder, more distinct, and I could hear something behind it now. A sound like wind, or maybe breathing. Heavy, rhythmic breathing. "Turn around," the voice said. Turn around, go back." I put down the CB handset and stared out at the fog. Every rational part of my mind was telling me this was impossible. Voices don't just appear on CB radios telling you to turn around. Mile markers don't repeat themselves. Roads don't loop when they're supposed to be straight. But I'd been driving long enough to know that sometimes, late at night on lonely highways, impossible things happen. I'd heard stories from other drivers over the years. Stories about phantom hitchhikers and ghost trucks and stretches of road where time didn't work right. I'd always figured they were just stories, the kind of tales people tell to pass the time or scare rookies. Now I wasn't so sure. I put the truck in gear and pulled back onto the highway. I'd made a decision. I was going to keep driving east, keep moving forward, no matter what. If I was stuck in some kind of loop, then eventually it had to end. It had to. Roads didn't just go on forever, with the same mile marker repeating. The fog seemed to get thicker as I drove. It pressed against the windshield like something alive, like it was trying to force its way into the cab. My headlights barely penetrated it at all now. I could see maybe 20 feet ahead, if that. I was creeping along at 30 miles an hour, hands tight on the wheel, eyes straining to see the white lines. Mile 213 appeared again, and again, and again. I stopped counting after the 10th time. Each time I passed it, the voice on the CB got a little louder, a little more insistent. Turn around, go back, turn around, go back. Always the same words, in that strange, distorted voice that didn't sound quite human. I don't know how long I drove like that. It felt like hours, but when I checked the clock on my dashboard, only 30 minutes had passed since I first noticed the repeating mile marker. Time wasn't working right. Nothing was working right. Then something changed. The fog started to thin a little, just enough that I could see further down the road. And that's when I saw them. The trucks. There were 3 of them ahead of me, spread out along the highway. At first, I felt a surge of relief. Other trucks meant other drivers, people who might be able to help me figure out what was happening. But as I got closer, something seemed off about them. They weren't moving. All 3 trucks were sitting dead still on the highway, not on the shoulder where they should have been if they'd stopped for any reason. Just stopped right there in the middle of the road. Hazard, lights off. No sign of life. I slowed down even more, pulling into the left lane to go around the first truck. It was an older Freightliner, maybe 10 years old, covered in road grime. As I passed, I looked up at the cab. The driver's door was open, hanging loose like someone had gotten out in a hurry and not bothered to close it. The interior lights were off. No sign of the driver. The second truck was the same, a Peterbilt, driver's door standing open, cab empty and dark. No signs of any accident or mechanical trouble. Just abandoned in the middle of the highway. When I reached the third truck, I recognized it. It was a blue Kenworth with Colorado plates, and it had a distinctive eagle decal on the passenger door. I knew that truck because I'd seen it at truck stops before. The driver was a guy named Martinez, someone I'd talked to a few times over CB radio. We'd never met in person, but I knew his voice, knew his truck, and now his truck was sitting empty on I-80, driver's door open, no sign of him anywhere. I picked up my CB handset with a shaking hand. Martinez? Frank Martinez? Are you out there? This is Colorado Dale. I found your truck. The only response was that same voice, still repeating its message. Turn around, go back, mile 213, turn around. I drove past the abandoned trucks, and the fog closed in behind me like a curtain. When I checked my mirrors, I couldn't see them anymore. It was like they'd never been there at all. Mile 213 appeared again out of the fog. I'd lost count of how many times I'd seen it now. 20, 30. The number on that sign had burned itself into my brain. I knew I'd never forget it, no matter how long I lived. The voice on the CB was continuous now, no longer fading in and out. Mile 213. Turn around. Go back. Mile 213. Turn around. Go back. Over and over, like a prayer or a warning. I reached for the CB to turn it off, but my hand froze halfway there. Some instinct told me that turning off the radio would be a mistake. that as unsettling as the voice was, it was better than complete silence. I kept driving. What else could I do? I couldn't turn around. Every instinct I had told me that turning around would be worse, that whatever was behind me was more dangerous than what lay ahead. I had to keep going forward. I had to find the end of this thing. And then, so suddenly it almost made me jump, everything changed. The fog lifted, not gradually, the way fog normally clears, but all at once, like someone had thrown a switch. 1 second I was driving blind through thick gray nothing, and the next second the air was clear, and I could see the highway stretching out ahead of me under a star-filled sky. I looked at the odometer. I'd driven over 200 miles according to the truck's computer, but when I checked my GPS, it showed I was only about 30 miles east of where I'd first entered the fog. 200 miles in the fog, and I'd covered 30 miles of actual distance. The CB radio crackled once and went silent. The strange voice was gone. When I tried calling out on Channel 19, other drivers responded immediately, talking about weather conditions and traffic up ahead like it was just another normal night on I-80. I didn't stop until I reached the truck stop in Laramie, another 40 miles down the road. I pulled into the parking lot, shut off the engine, and just sat there shaking for a long time. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. My shirt was soaked with sweat. Inside the truck stop, I bought a cup of coffee and sat at the counter trying to process what had just happened. Other drivers were coming and going, talking and laughing, completely normal. I wanted to tell someone about the fog, the repeating mile marker, the abandoned trucks, the voice on the radio. But I knew how it would sound. Crazy. Like I'd been hallucinating or had some kind of breakdown. So I kept quiet, finished my coffee, and got back on the road. I delivered my load to Omaha on time, filed my logbook like normal, and tried to forget about that night on I-80. But I couldn't forget. Over the next few weeks, I started doing research. I checked accident reports for I-80 in Wyoming, looking for any information about abandoned trucks or missing drivers. I found a few reports that caught my attention. 3 trucks had been found abandoned on I-80 between Rock Springs and Rollins over the past 5 years, all of them during foggy conditions. The drivers were never found. The cases remained unsolved. One of those trucks was a blue Kenworth with an eagle decal. The driver's name was Frank Martinez. I also found something else, something that made my blood run cold. When I checked the detailed navigation maps, the really high-resolution ones that show every detail of the highway system, I couldn't find mile 213 on I-80 in Wyoming. The markers went from 212 to 214. Mile 213 didn't exist. It had never existed. But I'd seen it. I'd passed it dozens of times that night in the fog. It was as real as anything I'd ever seen in my life. I tried calling the Wyoming Department of Transportation to ask about it, but the person I spoke with just got confused. She pulled up the records and confirmed what I'd already found. There was no mile 213 on that stretch of I-80. The markers went from 212 to 214, had gone that way since the highway was built back in the 1960s. "Are you sure about the location?" she asked me. "Maybe you were on a different highway, or maybe you misread the sign." I told her I was sure, but I could hear the doubt in her voice. She probably thought I was confused or mistaken. Maybe she thought I was crazy. I didn't blame her. If someone had told me this story, I wouldn't have believed them either. Since that night, I've talked to a few other drivers who've driven I-80 through that stretch of Wyoming. Most of them have never experienced anything unusual, but a couple of them, older guys who've been driving for decades, they got quiet when I mentioned the fog and mile 213. One of them told me he'd had a similar experience 10 years ago. Spent hours driving through fog and passing the same mile marker over and over. He'd never told anyone about it because he thought people would think he was losing his mind. "Some roads aren't right," he said to me over coffee at a truck stop in Cheyenne. Some places, something happened there a long time ago, and it left a mark, a stain. And sometimes, when conditions are right, you can drive into that stain, into what used to be or what might have been. I don't understand it, nobody does, but it's real. I don't know if I believe in ghosts or time loops or parallel dimensions. I don't know what happened to me that night in the fog, or what happened to Frank Martinez and those other drivers who disappeared. Maybe there's a rational explanation for all of it. Maybe I was hallucinating from exhaustion, and the abandoned trucks and the repeating mile marker were all in my head. But I don't think so. I think there's a stretch of I-80 in Wyoming where something is wrong, where the road doesn't work the way it's supposed to, where mile markers repeat and trucks disappear and fog comes rolling in from nowhere. And I think that somewhere in that fog, on a road that doesn't exist on any map, Mile 213 is still there, still waiting, still pulling drivers in. I've driven past that section of I-80 a few times since then, always in daylight, always when the weather is clear. And every time I watch my odometer carefully as I pass through the area where it happened. The markers go from 212 to 214, just like they're supposed to. No Mile 213, no fog, nothing unusual at all. But sometimes, late at night when I'm lying in my sleeper berth at a rest area, I'll turn on my CB radio and scan through the channels. And sometimes, just sometimes, I'll hear a faint voice buried in the static. Mile 213, turn around, go back. And I wonder if somewhere, in some version of that highway that exists alongside ours but separate from it, drivers are still circling through the fog, still passing that same mile marker over and over, never finding their way out, still hearing that voice on the radio, telling them to turn around, to go back, but never telling them how. I'll never drive that stretch of I-80 at night again. I'll never drive it in fog. And if dispatch ever tries to send me that way when the weather looks uncertain, I'll refuse the load. I don't care if it costs me money. I don't care if it damages my reputation with the company. Some roads aren't worth the risk. Because I know what's out there. I know that Mile 213 is real, even if it doesn't exist. And I know that next time I might not find my way out of that fog. Next time, my truck might be the one found abandoned on the highway, driver's door standing open, no sign of me anywhere. The company keeps trying to send me that route. Every few weeks, a load comes up that would take me through that section of Wyoming, and every time I call dispatch and tell them I'm not available. They've stopped asking questions. They just reassign the load to someone else and move on. I wonder sometimes about those other drivers, the ones who take the loads I turn down. I wonder if any of them have driven into the fog, if any of them have seen Mile 213, if any of them have heard that voice on the radio, and I wonder if any of them made it back out. The desert has a way of making you feel small. I've hauled loads through Arizona and New Mexico more times than I can count, and that feeling never goes away. During the day, it's the endless brown landscape stretching to the horizon, nothing but scrub brush and red rock for 100 miles. At night, it's the darkness, the kind of darkness that makes you realize how far you are from anything or anyone. I learned to respect the desert early in my career. Respect the heat, respect the distances, respect the isolation. But what I learned on a September night 2 years ago is that the desert keeps secrets, old secrets. And sometimes, if you're unlucky enough, you stumble onto one of those secrets and it changes you forever. My name's Travis Holbrook, and I've been running freight for 12 years. Mostly, I work the southwestern routes, anything from El Paso to Los Angeles, Phoenix to Albuquerque. I know these roads like I know my own face in the mirror. Or at least I thought I did. It was a Tuesday night, around 11:30. I was hauling a load of restaurant equipment from Tucson to Albuquerque, taking Highway 60 through the eastern part of Arizona. It's not the fastest route, but it's quieter than the interstate and I prefer it. Less traffic, fewer cops, just you and the road and the big empty sky. I'd been driving since early afternoon and I was making good time. The load was light, the truck was running smooth, and the weather was perfect. Clear sky, cool temperature, just enough breeze to keep things comfortable. The kind of night that makes you remember why you chose this life in the first place. My GPS was one of those newer models, the kind with real-time traffic updates and route optimization. It had been routing me along Highway 60 without any issues when, around mile marker 347, it suddenly chimed and announced that it had found a faster route. In 2 miles, take exit 349 and turn left, the pleasant female voice said. This route will save you 43 minutes. I glanced at the screen. The GPS was showing an alternate route that cut northeast through what looked like back roads, eventually connecting with a Highway 117 and then Interstate 40. If the time savings were accurate, it would put me in Albuquerque well ahead of schedule, which meant I could grab a decent night's sleep instead of pushing through till dawn. I'd never taken this route before, didn't even know there was an exit at 349. But GPS technology had gotten pretty good over the years, and the system had never steered me wrong before. Plus, 43 minutes was 43 minutes. In this business, time is money. Exit 349 appeared right where the GPS said it would be. It was a small exit, the kind you might miss if you weren't looking for it. The sign was old and weathered, hard to read in my headlights. I could just make out the words Route 78 North, and below that something that might have been a town name, but the paint was too faded to tell. I took the exit and turned left like the GPS instructed. The road was narrower than I expected. 2 lanes of asphalt that looked like it hadn't been maintained in years. Cracks ran through it like spider webs, and the shoulders were rough gravel that crunched under my tires when I drifted too far to the right. Continue on Route 78 for 37 miles, my GPS announced. 37 miles on a back road through the desert at midnight. I felt a small twinge of uncertainty, but I pushed it aside. The GPS knew what it was doing. And besides, I'd driven on worse roads than this. The first 10 miles were uneventful. Empty desert on both sides. The road cutting straight through the darkness. No other traffic, no signs of civilization. Just my headlights and the white lines and the dark shapes of hills in the distance. Around mile 11, I started noticing things that bothered me. Small things at first. The road had no mile markers, which was unusual even for a state route. There were no reflector posts along the shoulders, nothing to help guide drivers at night, and the few road signs I passed were so old and faded that I couldn't read them. But the thing that really caught my attention was the complete absence of any tire marks on the road. Normally, you can see where other vehicles have driven, especially on older asphalt. Dark tracks from oil and rubber, worn down strips where wheels run. This road had nothing. The asphalt looked untouched, like nobody had driven on it in years. I picked up my CB handset and called out on Channel 19. This is Phoenix Travis on Route 78. Anybody out here familiar with this road? Static. Just pure static. Not even a distant carrier wave from another trucker. I tried a few other channels with the same result. My CB was working fine. I could see the signal meter moving when I keyed the mic, but there was nobody out there to hear me. I checked my phone. No signal. That wasn't surprising in the middle of the desert, but it added to the growing sense of isolation I was feeling. I was completely alone out here, 30 miles from the nearest highway, with no way to communicate with anyone. The GPS showed me still on course, the little blue line tracking my progress along Route 78. According to the screen, I should reach Highway 117 in another 26 miles. I told myself to relax, that I was just feeling spooked because of the late hour and the empty road. Then I saw the first strange thing. It was a footprint, or rather the mark of a footprint. Right there in the middle of my lane, visible in my headlights. It looked like someone had stepped in water and then walked across the road, leaving wet footprints behind. Except the desert was bone dry. It hadn't rained in weeks. I slowed down, watching the road carefully. There was another footprint, and another. A trail of wet footprints crossing from the right shoulder to the left shoulder, each one clearly visible against the dry asphalt. They looked fresh, like someone had just walked across the road seconds before I arrived. But there was nobody there. No person, no vehicle, nothing but empty desert on both sides of the road. The footprints just appeared out of nowhere, crossed the road, and disappeared into the darkness. I kept driving, but slower now, my hands tight on the wheel. The GPS chimed again. In 5 miles, you will reach your destination, Rose Creek. Rose Creek? That wasn't on my route. I was supposed to be going to Highway 117, not some town I'd never heard of. I glanced at the GPS screen and saw that the route had changed. Instead of showing me connecting to the highway, it was now showing me arriving at a destination marker in the middle of nowhere. Recalculating, I said out loud, reaching for the GPS controls. But before I could touch it, the screen flickered and the route went back to what it had been before. Highway 117 in 21 miles. No mention of Rose Creek. I was getting seriously uncomfortable now. GPS systems don't just glitch like that. They don't add destinations that weren't there before. And they definitely don't show routes to towns that don't exist. But I was committed now. I was too far along this road to turn around. And even if I wanted to, there was nowhere to turn a 48-foot trailer around on this narrow highway. I had to keep going forward and trust that eventually this road would connect to something I recognized. The wet footprints kept appearing. Sometimes they crossed the road, sometimes they ran alongside it for a while before veering off into the desert. They were always fresh-looking, always wet against the dry pavement. I tried not to think about what might be making them. Around mile marker 23, I saw the lights. They were far ahead, just tiny pinpricks of yellow light in the darkness. As I got closer, I could see they were street lights, the old-fashioned kind with bulbs that give off that sodium vapor glow. And beneath them I could make out the shapes of buildings. It was a town, a small town, sitting right there in the middle of the desert where no town should be. The GPS chimed. You have arrived at Rose Creek. I slowed to a crawl as I entered the town. The road widened into what must have been the main street, with buildings on both sides. They were old, really old. The kind of structures you'd see in photographs from the 1950s. Single-story businesses with big plate glass windows and hand-painted signs. A post office. A general store. A barber shop with a faded red and white pole. All of the buildings were dark except for one. Near the end of the street, on the right side, there was a diner. It had a big neon sign in the window that said, "Open 24 hours," in red letters. The lights were on inside, and I could see movement through the windows. I should have kept driving. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to keep going, to get through this town and back onto Route 78 and away from whatever this place was. But I was also curious. And if I'm being honest, I was a little relieved to see signs of life after driving through empty desert for so long. I pulled my truck over to the side of the street and parked. The engine ticked as it cooled, the only sound in the stillness. I sat there for a moment, looking at the diner, trying to decide if I should go in. The sign said it was open. The lights were on. I'd seen someone moving around inside. It was just a diner. What was the worst that could happen? I climbed down from the cab and walked toward the diner. My boots crunched on the gravel, loud in the silence. As I got closer, I could see more details. The diner was one of those classic stainless steel jobs, probably from the 1950s, with chrome trim and big windows. The neon sign buzzed softly and I could smell coffee. I reached for the door handle and pulled. The door opened smoothly, and a little bell jingled as I stepped inside. The diner was empty. Not just empty of customers, empty of everything. The stools at the counter were there, the booths along the wall were there, but there was no one behind the counter. No waitress, no cook, no other customers. The coffee pot I'd seen from outside was sitting on a burner, steam rising from it, but there was nobody there to pour it. "Hello," I called out. My voice sounded strange in the empty space, flat and dead, like the walls were absorbing the sound. "Anybody here?" No answer. I walked further into the diner, my boots squeaking on the black and white tile floor. Everything looked normal at first glance. The counter was clean, the salt and pepper shakers were lined up neatly, there were menus standing in metal holders at each booth. But as I looked closer, I started noticing details that weren't right. The calendar on the wall behind the counter showed September 1952. Not a vintage calendar, but an actual calendar from 1952, with the dates marked off in pencil up to the 23rd. The newspaper lying on the counter was dated September 24th, 1952, yellowed with age, but still readable. The coffee in the pot was hot. I could feel the heat radiating from it when I put my hand near the glass. But that newspaper was 70 years old. I looked around the diner more carefully. There were other signs that someone had been here recently. A half-eaten piece of pie on one of the counter stools, the fork still in it. A cigarette burning in an ashtray, smoke curling up toward the ceiling. A coffee cup with lipstick on the rim, still warm when I touched it. But there was nobody there. The diner was completely empty. I backed toward the door, my heart pounding. This was wrong. All of this was wrong. The town, the diner, the fresh coffee, and the burning cigarette and the calendar from 1952. None of it made sense. I pushed through the door and practically ran back to my truck. I climbed into the cab, started the engine, and pulled back onto the road, driving through the rest of the town as fast as I dared. The other buildings rushed past my windows, all dark, all empty-looking. No lights in any of the windows. No signs of life anywhere except that one impossible diner. As I left the town behind, I checked my mirrors. The diner lights were still on, the neon sign still glowing. And for just a second, just a brief moment, I thought I saw someone standing in the doorway. A figure in what looked like a waitress uniform, watching my truck drive away. But when I blinked and looked again, there was nobody there. Route 78 continued north through the desert. I drove faster than I should have, pushing the truck to 60, then 70 miles an hour. I needed to get away from that town, needed to get back to something normal, something I could understand. The GPS was silent now. No more helpful announcements about routes or arrival times. The screen showed me on a road that curved and twisted through terrain that looked nothing like the actual landscape around me. I ignored it and just followed the white lines on the pavement. After about 15 miles, the road started to climb into low hills. The terrain changed from flat desert to rocky slopes covered with juniper trees. And then, so suddenly I almost missed it in the darkness, Route 78 ended at a T intersection with Highway 117. I turned right onto Highway 117 and immediately felt better. This was a real road. A modern road with reflectors and mile markers and the occasional car passing in the opposite direction. I was back in the normal world. I drove straight through to Albuquerque without stopping, delivered my load, and spent the next day trying to figure out what had happened to me. I searched online for any mention of Rose Creek, Arizona. I found nothing. No town by that name anywhere in Arizona or New Mexico. I looked at satellite imagery of the area where I'd driven, zooming in on Route 78. The road existed, sort of. It showed up on some maps but not others, and where it did appear, it was marked as unmaintained or possibly closed. I called the Arizona Department of Transportation and asked about Route 78 and exit 349 off Highway 60. The person I spoke with checked their records and told me there was no exit 349 on Highway 60 in that area. The exit numbers went from 348 to 350. Exit 349 had never existed. "Are you sure?" I asked. "I took it just last night. It was right there, a small exit with a sign for Route 78. "I'm looking at the official records right now," she said, sounding puzzled. "There's no exit 349. There hasn't been for as long as I've worked here, and that's 23 years. Maybe you're thinking of a different highway." I thanked her and hung up. I wasn't thinking of a different highway. I knew what I'd seen, what I'd experienced. That exit was real. That road was real. That town was real. Over the next few weeks, I talked to other drivers who ran routes through that part of Arizona. Most of them had never heard of Route 78 or Rose Creek. But one older driver, a guy named Carson, who'd been hauling freight for 30 years, he got a strange look on his face when I mentioned it. "Rose Creek," he said slowly, like he was trying to remember something from a long time ago. "Yeah, I've heard of it. Old ghost town, used to be a mining town back in the 50s. Got wiped out by a flash flood in 1952. Killed everybody. They never rebuilt it. The state came in and removed it from the maps, erased all records of it. Too painful for the families, I guess." "September 1952?" I asked, thinking of the calendar in the diner. He nodded. "September 23rd, 1952. 100 people died in that flood. They say it came out of nowhere, a wall of water 20 feet high. The whole town was gone in less than 10 minutes. I felt cold all over." "Where was this town located?" "Somewhere off Highway 60, I think. Northeast of there. But like I said, they erased it from the maps. You won't find it now. It's just desert out there. But I had found it. Or it had found me." I'd driven through Rose Creek on September 23rd, exactly 70 years after the flood that destroyed it. I'd seen the diner with its 1952 calendar, its fresh coffee, its burning cigarette. I'd seen the waitress in the doorway, or the ghost of a waitress watching me leave. And I'd seen those wet footprints on the road. Footprints made by water, by a flood, appearing and disappearing in the middle of a dry desert night. I've driven past that area on Highway 60 several times since then. I've looked for exit 349, looked for any sign of Route 78. I've never found it. The exit numbers go from 348 to 350, just like the DOT lady said. There's no gap, no missing exit, no faded sign pointing toward a road that doesn't exist. But sometimes, late at night, when I'm driving through the desert, my GPS will chime with that same pleasant female voice. "In 2 miles, take exit 349 and turn left. This route will save you 43 minutes. And when I look at the screen, I can see it there for just a second. The alternate route. The road through Rose Creek. The shortcut that leads to a town that drowned 70 years ago and still serves coffee to travelers who don't know they're driving through a graveyard. I never take that exit anymore. When the GPS suggests it, I cancel the route and stick to the highway. I don't care if it adds time to my trip. I don't care if it uses more fuel. Some shortcuts aren't worth taking, because I know what's at the end of that road. I know that somewhere in the desert, in a place that exists and doesn't exist at the same time, Rose Creek is still there. The diner lights are still on. The coffee is still hot. The waitress is still waiting for customers who will never come. And on the road leading to town, wet footprints still appear in the darkness. Footprints made by water that fell from the sky 70 years ago and never stopped falling. Footprints left by people who drowned trying to escape a flood that came out of nowhere and took everything from them in 10 terrible minutes. I think about those people sometimes, the 100 residents of Rose Creek who died on September 23, 1952. I wonder if they know they're dead. I wonder if they're still going about their daily lives, serving coffee and reading newspapers and waiting for the flood to come, over and over again, reliving that last day forever. And I wonder what would have happened if I'd stayed in that diner longer, if I'd sat down at the counter, if I'd ordered coffee from the waitress who wasn't there, if I'd still been in town when the calendar changed from the 23rd to the 24th. Would I have heard the water coming? Would I have seen the wall of brown water rushing down the street, sweeping away buildings and cars and people? Would I have drowned with them, trapped in a loop of time that plays out the same tragedy night after night? I don't know, and I never want to find out. The desert keeps its secrets. It keeps Rose Creek hidden somewhere in the folds of time and space, visible only to travelers who take the wrong exit at the wrong time. And maybe that's for the best. Maybe some towns should stay buried. Maybe some disasters are so terrible that they echo through the years, creating places that exist outside of normal time, where the dead go on living and the past refuses to become the past. All I know is that exit 349 is still out there somewhere, waiting for the next driver to see it on their GPS. And when they take that exit and drive through the darkness toward those distant lights, they'll find what I found. A town that died but won't stay dead. A diner where the coffee is always hot and the waitress never comes. And footprints made of water on a bone-dry road, leading nowhere and everywhere all at once. I just hope they're smart enough to keep driving. I hope they don't stop at the diner. I hope they make it through to the other side and back onto Highway 117, back to the real world where towns stay buried when they're supposed to. Because if they don't, if they stop and stay, then maybe they become part of Rose Creek too. Maybe they join the 100 people who died in 1952, living out that last day over and over, waiting for a flood that never stops coming. And maybe that's what the waitress in the doorway was trying to tell me as I drove away. Maybe she was thanking me for not staying, for not becoming one of them. Or maybe she was just sad to see another chance at escape drive past without stopping. I'll never know. And every time my GPS suggests that shortcut, every time it tries to route me through Rose Creek, I think about her standing in that doorway. And I keep driving on Highway 60, taking the long way, the safe way, the way that doesn't lead through towns that exist in the spaces between what was and what is. The desert has a way of making you feel small, but it also has a way of showing you things that make you understand just how small you really are. How little we understand about the places we drive through and the roads we travel. How thin the line is between the world we know and the worlds that exist just beyond our headlights, waiting in the darkness for someone to take the wrong turn. I won't be taking that turn again. Not ever. But somewhere out there, exit 349 is still waiting. Rose Creek is still open for business, and the wet footprints are still appearing on the road, made by water that fell 70 years ago and will keep falling forever, in a town where time stopped on September 23, 1952, and never started again. Some nights on the road, you get so tired that your eyes start playing tricks on you. You see things that aren't there, shadows that move wrong, lights where there shouldn't be lights. After 15 years of hauling freight across this country, I've learned to recognize when I'm too tired to keep driving. That's when you pull over, grab a few hours of sleep, and wake up feeling human again. But what happened to me at a rest area on I-70 in Kansas last winter taught me that sometimes what you see in the dark isn't your tired eyes playing tricks. Sometimes it's something else entirely. Something that wants you to think you're just tired, just seeing things, right up until it's too late to get away. My name is Cole Brennan. I run a route from Denver to St. Louis about twice a month, hauling automotive parts for a manufacturer that supplies dealerships across the Midwest. It's good steady work, the kind that pays the bills and keeps me on the road enough that I don't get bored, but not so much that I burn out. I've been doing this run for 8 years, and I know every truck stop, every rest area, every shortcut between those two cities. I-70 through Kansas is one of those roads that seems to go on forever. Flat prairie in every direction, nothing but wheat fields and sky from one horizon to the other. During the day, it has a certain beauty to it, all that open space and golden grain. At night, it's just darkness, mile after mile of nothing, with maybe a farmhouse light visible every 10 or 20 miles. It was a Thursday in late January, around 2:30 in the morning. I'd been driving since noon the previous day, pushing to make my delivery window in St. Louis. The weather had been clear most of the way, but as I got deeper into Kansas, the temperature started dropping, and a light snow began to fall. Not enough to be dangerous, just enough to make everything look gray and blurry in my headlights. I'd been fighting fatigue for the last hour. My eyes kept trying to close, and I'd caught myself drifting toward the shoulder twice. I knew I needed to stop, needed to rest, but I kept telling myself I could make it to the next town, grab some coffee, push through. That's the trucking mentality. You keep going until you can't go anymore. But when I saw the sign for the rest area at mile marker 275, I made the decision to stop. I knew this rest area. I'd stopped there dozens of times before. It was one of the bigger ones, with bathrooms, vending machines, picnic areas, and usually anywhere from 10 to 20 trucks parked there overnight. It was a good place to grab 3 or 4 hours of sleep before continuing on. The exit ramp curved off the highway and into the rest area parking lot. As I came around the curve, my headlights swept across the lot, and I felt the first twinge of something being wrong. The parking lot was empty, not just empty of cars, completely empty. Not a single vehicle anywhere. No trucks, no cars, no RVs, nothing. Just empty parking spaces stretching away into the darkness under the dim glow of the lot lights. I slowed down, looking around in confusion. This rest area was never empty. Never. Even at 3 in the morning on a weeknight, there were always at least a few trucks parked here. Drivers sleeping in their cabs, or using the facilities, or just taking a break from the highway. The fact that it was completely deserted was strange enough to make me hesitate. But I was exhausted. My eyes were burning. My back ached from sitting for so many hours, and I desperately needed to use the bathroom. And it was just a rest area. What was I afraid of? I pulled into a parking spot near the bathroom building and shut off my engine. The sudden silence was startling. No road noise, no engine rumble, nothing but the soft whisper of snow falling and the distant hum of the lot lights. I sat there for a moment, looking around at the empty parking lot, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling that had settled over me. The bathroom building was maybe 50 yards away, a squat concrete structure with those industrial-style lights mounted on the walls. The lights were on, which meant the facility was open. I could see the men's room door on the left side of the building, the women's room on the right. I climbed down from my cab, my boots crunching on the thin layer of snow that had accumulated on the pavement. The cold air hit me like a slap, making me catch my breath. It had to be close to 0 degrees, with the wind chill making it feel even colder. I walked toward the bathroom building, my hands shoved deep in my jacket pockets, my breath coming out in white clouds. As I got closer, I noticed something odd. The door to the men's room was moving, not swinging open and closed like someone was going in or out, but shifting slightly like it wasn't quite latched and the wind was pushing it. Except there was no wind. The air was still and cold, the snow falling straight down without any breeze to move it. I stopped about 20 feet from the building, watching that door shift and move. It would ease open an inch or two, then close again, then open, then close. A slow, rhythmic movement that didn't match anything natural. "Hello?" I called out. My voice sounded flat and dead in the cold air, like the snow was absorbing the sound. "Anybody in there?" No answer. The door kept moving. Open, close, open, close. I approached slowly, every instinct I had telling me to turn around and get back in my truck. But I really needed to use the bathroom and I was being ridiculous. It was just a door that wasn't latched properly, moving because of air pressure or something. Nothing sinister about it. I pushed the door open all the way and stepped inside. The bathroom looked normal at first. White tile walls, 6 stalls on the left, 6 urinals and sinks on the right. Bright fluorescent lights overhead, humming softly. Everything clean and well maintained, like it had been recently serviced. But as I stood there, I started noticing details that weren't quite right. The air smelled wrong. Not dirty or unclean, but strange, like ozone after a lightning strike, or the way the air smells just before a bad storm. Sharp and electric and unnatural. And it was warm, much warmer than it should have been. The heating system must have been running full blast, because the temperature in the bathroom had to be at least 70 degrees. After the bitter cold outside, it was almost uncomfortable. I walked to one of the urinals, my footsteps echoing off the tile walls. As I was using the facilities, I heard a sound from one of the stalls behind me. A soft thud, like something had fallen or been dropped. I finished quickly and turned around, looking at the row of stalls. All of the doors were closed except for one at the far end, which stood slightly ajar. "Somebody in here?" I asked, my voice echoing in the empty space. No answer, but I heard another sound, a dragging noise, like something being pulled across the floor. It came from the stall with the open door. I should have left right then. Should have walked out of that bathroom, gotten in my truck and driven away. But curiosity is a powerful thing, and I found myself walking toward that stall, telling myself it was probably just a maintenance issue or some animal that had gotten inside. I pushed the stall door open all the way. The stall was empty, just a toilet and walls and floor. But on the floor, right in front of the toilet, there was something that made my blood run cold. Wet footprints. 2 sets of them, running from the toilet to the wall and then just stopping, like whoever made them had walked straight through the concrete. The footprints were fresh. Water was still pooled in the heel prints, still glistening under the fluorescent lights. I knelt down and touched one of them with my finger. The water was ice cold, colder than tap water should be. I stood up quickly and backed out of the stall. This was wrong. All of it was wrong. The empty parking lot, the moving door, the warm bathroom, and now these impossible footprints. I needed to get out of here. I turned to leave, and that's when I heard it. A voice, or something like a voice, coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. It wasn't speaking words, just making sounds. Syllables that didn't quite form into language, rising and falling in pitch like someone trying to talk but forgetting how. I ran, pushed through the bathroom door, and sprinted across the parking lot toward my truck, my boots slipping on the snow, my breath coming in ragged gasps. Behind me, I could hear that voice getting louder, more insistent, those meaningless syllables echoing across the empty rest area. I reached my truck, yanked open the door, and climbed inside. I started the engine with shaking hands and threw the transmission into gear. As I pulled out of the parking spot, I looked in my mirror at the bathroom building. The lights inside were flickering now, going from bright to dim to dark and back again. And standing in the doorway of the men's room, silhouetted against the pulsing light, was a figure, tall and thin and perfectly still, watching my truck drive away. I didn't look back again. I drove out of that rest area and back onto I-70, going at least 20 miles over the speed limit, not caring if I got pulled over. I just needed to get away from that place. About 5 miles down the highway, I reached for my CB radio to call out to other drivers, to tell them about what I'd seen, to hear another human voice and remind myself that I wasn't alone out here. I turned it on and immediately heard static. Not normal static, but a deep, pulsing hum that rose and fell in the same rhythm as that voice I'd heard in the bathroom. And underneath the static, I could hear words, or almost words. Syllables that were trying to form into language, getting closer each time, like something was learning to speak, practicing, getting ready to communicate something I didn't want to hear. I reached for the volume knob to turn it down, and that's when I heard it clearly. Just for a second, just long enough for me to understand. Come back. I shut off the CB radio and didn't turn it on again for the rest of the drive. I made it to St. Louis by mid-morning, delivered my load, and tried to forget about what had happened at the rest area. I told myself it was exhaustion, hallucination, my tired brain playing tricks on me. The empty parking lot was just a coincidence. The moving door was wind I didn't notice. The footprints were from an earlier visitor whose water hadn't dried yet. The voice was my imagination. But I couldn't explain the CB radio. I couldn't explain how that voice knew to tell me to come back. I couldn't explain the figure in the doorway. Over the next few weeks, I asked other drivers about that rest area at mile marker 275 on I-70 in Kansas. Most of them knew it, had stopped there before. But when I asked if they'd ever stopped there late at night and found it empty, I got strange reactions. One older driver, a guy named Henderson, who'd been running freight for 30 years, he got quiet when I asked. We were having coffee at a truck stop in Topeka, and he stared into his cup for a long time before answering. I stopped there once, he finally said. Maybe 5 years ago, middle of the night, just like you. Place was empty. No other trucks, no cars, nothing. I thought it was strange, but I was tired, so I parked and went to use the bathroom. He paused, took a sip of coffee. I heard something in there. In the bathroom, not like a person. More like something trying to be a person, something practicing. I got out of there fast. Did you ever go back? I asked. He shook his head. Never stopped there at night again. Only during the day, when there's other people around. And even then, I don't like it. There's something wrong with that place. Something that comes out after dark. I found 2 other drivers who had similar experiences. Both of them had stopped at that rest area late at night. Both had found it mysteriously empty. Both had heard strange sounds. One of them saw wet footprints in the snow outside the building, leading from the bathroom to the parking lot and then just stopping in the middle of nowhere. The other one heard that voice on his CB radio, the same voice I'd heard, telling him to come back. None of them could explain what it was. None of them had any idea why that rest area seemed to be empty at certain times, or what was making those sounds, or where those wet footprints came from. We were all just grateful we'd gotten out of there when we did. I've driven I-70 through Kansas probably 20 times since that night. I always pass that rest area during the day now, never at night. And every time I drive past it during daylight hours, it looks completely normal. Trucks parked in neat rows, cars in the car section, people walking their dogs or using the facilities. just a regular rest area on a regular highway. But I know what it becomes after dark. I know that sometimes, when the conditions are right, that parking lot empties out. The trucks leave, the cars drive away, and whatever lives there comes out to wait, to practice its voice, to leave its wet footprints, to watch from doorways for the next tired driver who doesn't know any better than to stop. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's something that was always there, or something that happened there, or something that followed the highway when it was built and found a place to settle. I don't know if it's alone or if there are more of them, scattered across the country at rest areas and truck stops and lonely places along empty highways. All I know is that some rest areas aren't safe to stop at after dark. Some places have things living in them that shouldn't exist, and sometimes, when you're tired and desperate for a break, you might pull into one of those places without knowing what you're walking into. The worst part is the not knowing what I saw in that doorway, not knowing where those footprints came from, not knowing what that voice was, or what it wanted, or what would have happened if I'd gone back when it told me to. But I think about it sometimes, late at night when I'm driving through empty country. I think about that figure standing in the doorway, watching my truck drive away. I think about those wet footprints leading to nowhere. I think about that voice on the CB radio, learning to speak, getting better at forming words. And I wonder how many drivers have stopped at that rest area and never left. How many trucks have pulled into that empty parking lot and just disappeared, swallowed up by whatever waits there in the dark. How many voices that thing has learned to imitate. How many people it's called back over the years. I wonder if one night, when I'm driving through Kansas on I-70, my CB radio will crackle to life even though I have it turned off. And I'll hear my own voice coming through the speaker, calling out to me from that rest area, telling me to come back, telling me it's safe, telling me there's nothing to be afraid of. I wonder if I'll be able to resist, if I'll be able to keep driving, knowing that something has my voice now, has learned how I sound, has practiced until it can imitate me perfectly. Or if I'll take that exit at mile marker 275, pull into that empty parking lot and walk into that bathroom one more time. Walk toward the sound of water dripping and doors moving and syllables trying to form into speech. Walk until I find the source of those wet footprints, until I see what stands in the shadows and waits for tired drivers to stop. I hope I never find out. I hope I'm strong enough to keep driving, to ignore whatever calls to me from that place. But I know how exhaustion works. I know how it wears you down, makes you vulnerable, makes you stop thinking clearly. And I know that one night, when I'm tired enough and desperate enough, I might forget to be afraid. I might see that exit sign and think, just for a moment, that it would be okay to stop. That I'm being paranoid. That it's just a rest area, nothing more. That's when it will get me. That's when I'll pull off the highway and into that empty parking lot, and the thing that waits there will finally have what it's been practicing for. Until then, I keep driving. I stop at other rest areas during the day when there are other people around. And I never, ever stop at mile marker 275 on I-70 in Kansas after dark. Because I know it's still there, still waiting, still learning, still practicing those almost words that get a little clearer each time someone hears them. And someday, it's going to get them exactly right. It's going to call out in a voice that sounds perfectly human, perfectly normal, perfectly safe. And whoever hears it is going to believe it. They're going to stop, and they're never going to leave. The CB radio in my truck stays off at night now, especially when I'm driving through Kansas. I don't want to hear what comes through on those frequencies after dark. I don't want to know whose voices it's learned, whose words it's practicing. I just want to keep moving, keep driving, keep putting distance between myself and that rest area, between myself and whatever waits there in the empty parking lot under those buzzing lights. Because the road is full of places like that. Places that look normal during the day but become something else after dark. Places where the rules we understand don't apply anymore. Places where things that shouldn't exist have found gaps in the world to hide in, waiting for people like us to stumble into them. And the only way to stay safe is to know where those places are. To remember them. To avoid them when the sun goes down and the highway gets dark and the miles stretch out empty ahead of you. Mile marker 275. Rest area. I-70. Kansas. I'll never forget it. And I'll never stop there again. No matter how tired I get. No matter how badly I need a break. Because some rest stops offer more than just a place to sleep. They offer a place to stay forever. There's a difference between bad weather and dangerous weather. Bad weather is rain that makes the roads slick, wind that buffets your trailer, fog that cuts your visibility. You slow down, you stay alert, you get through it. Dangerous weather is when the sky turns the wrong color and the air feels electric and you know something bad is coming. After 19 years of driving truck, I've learned to read the signs. I've learned when to pull over and wait it out. But sometimes you don't get that choice. Sometimes the storm catches you in the wrong place at the wrong time, and all you can do is keep driving and hope you make it through to the other side. My name's Mason Tucker, and I've been hauling refrigerated freight across the Midwest and South for nearly 2 decades. Produce, mostly. Lettuce from California, oranges from Florida, apples from Washington. Anything that needs to stay cold and get somewhere fast. It's demanding work, tight schedules, and zero tolerance for delays, but it pays well and I like the challenge. This particular run was supposed to be routine. I was hauling a load of produce from Memphis to Little Rock, a straight shot down I-40 through eastern Arkansas. 3 hours on a good day, maybe 4 if you hit traffic or road construction. I'd done this run hundreds of times. Could probably drive it in my sleep. It was the first week of June, and the weather had been building toward something all day. You could feel it in the air, that heavy pressure that comes before a big storm. The sky had been gray since morning, and by the time I left Memphis around 6 in the evening, the clouds were so low and dark they looked like they were sitting right on top of the highway. The first drops of rain hit my windshield about 20 miles outside Memphis. Big, fat drops that exploded on the glass like water balloons. Within 5 minutes, it was a downpour. Within 10, it was the kind of rain where your wipers can't keep up no matter how fast you run them. I slowed down to about 45 miles an hour, my hands tight on the wheel, eyes straining to see the white lines through the sheets of water. The radio was crackling with severe thunderstorm warnings for the entire region. Possible tornadoes, golf ball-sized hail, dangerous lightning. The works. Traffic had thinned out considerably. Most smart people had pulled over to wait out the storm. But I had a delivery window to make, and my load was time-sensitive. Produce doesn't care about thunderstorms. It just keeps getting older, keeps getting closer to spoiling. So I kept driving, telling myself I'd pull over if it got any worse. The lightning started around mile marker 32. Not distant flashes on the horizon, but close strikes that lit up the entire sky like daylight, and were followed almost immediately by thunder so loud it rattled my teeth. I could feel the electricity in the air, making my hair stand on end, making the skin on my arms prickle. That's when I first drove under the overpass. It wasn't a big overpass, just a simple concrete structure where a county road crossed over I-40. I'd passed under it probably 1,000 times before, without giving it a second thought. But as I drove beneath it this time, something happened. My headlights cut out. Just for a second, maybe 2 seconds at most, everything went dark. The headlights, the dashboard lights, even the radio. Complete electrical failure. And in that moment of darkness, I could feel the temperature drop inside the cab, like I'd driven into a freezer. Then the lights came back on, the radio crackled back to life, and everything was normal again. I checked my instruments. Everything looked fine. Voltage was normal, no warning lights on the dash. It was like the electrical system had hiccuped and then recovered. Weird, but not unheard of. Sometimes, moisture gets into connections during heavy rain and causes temporary shorts. I kept driving, but I was more alert now, watching for any other signs of electrical problems. My refrigeration unit was running fine, which was the most important thing. As long as that stayed operational, I could deal with a few glitches in the truck's electrical system. The storm was getting worse. The rain was coming down so hard now that I could barely see 50 feet ahead of me. Lightning was striking constantly, spider-webbing across the sky in brilliant purple-white branches. The thunder was continuous, a rolling boom that never quite stopped. About 45 minutes later, according to my clock, I approached the overpass again. Wait, that wasn't right. I checked my odometer. I'd driven about 23 miles since the first overpass, but there wasn't another overpass that close on this stretch of I-40. The next one should have been at least 40 miles away. But there it was, looming up ahead in my headlights. The same concrete structure, the same county road crossing overhead. I could even see the same graffiti spray-painted on the support pillars, a stylized skull and some words I couldn't make out in the rain. As I drove underneath it, the same thing happened. Complete electrical failure. Lights out, radio dead, temperature drop. 2 seconds of total darkness and cold. Then everything came back on. This time, I noticed something else. In that brief moment when the lights came back on, just as I was emerging from under the overpass, I thought I saw something. A shape, standing in the shadows beneath the concrete structure. Too tall to be a person, too still to be anything alive. But when I looked in my mirrors, there was nothing there. Just the overpass receding into the rain behind me. I grabbed my CB handset and called out on Channel 19. "This is Arkansas Mason, westbound on I-40 near mile marker 55. Is anybody else out here in this storm?" Static. Heavy static, like the storm was interfering with the radio signal. But underneath the static I thought I heard something. A rhythmic thumping sound, like a heartbeat or machinery or footsteps on wet pavement. "Anybody copy?" I tried again. The static changed pitch, rose and fell in waves, and underneath it that thumping sound got louder, more insistent. I turned off the CB. My hands were shaking slightly and I told myself it was just nerves from driving in the storm. But I knew I was lying to myself. Something was wrong here. Something beyond just bad weather and electrical glitches. I checked my GPS. According to it, I was exactly where I should be, making steady progress westbound on I-40 toward Little Rock. But my odometer was telling a different story. I should have covered nearly 70 miles since leaving Memphis. The odometer showed 27 miles were missing. I kept driving, my eyes flicking between the road ahead and the instruments on my dash. The rain showed no signs of letting up. If anything, it was getting heavier. I could hear it pounding on the roof of my cab like fists trying to get in. The third time I approached the overpass, I knew it was coming. I could feel it somehow, a pressure building in my chest, a tightness in my throat. The same overpass, the same graffiti, the same concrete pillars. This time, I slowed down, dropped my speed to maybe 20 miles an hour as I approached. I wanted to see what happened, needed to understand what was going on. As I drove under the overpass, the lights cut out right on schedule. 2 seconds of darkness. But this time, in that darkness, I saw something. There was a figure standing beneath the overpass. maybe 30 feet off to the right side of the road. Tall and thin, wearing what looked like dark clothes. Its head was bowed, like it was looking at the ground. And it was completely motionless, not even swaying in the wind and rain. I couldn't see any details. The darkness was too complete, and the moment was too brief. But I got the overwhelming impression of something waiting, something patient, something that had been standing there for a very long time. The lights came back on, and the figure was gone. Or maybe it had never been there at all. Maybe it was just my imagination filling in shapes in the darkness. But I didn't think so. I pushed down on the accelerator, increasing my speed despite the rain and poor visibility. I needed to get away from that overpass, needed to break whatever cycle I'd gotten trapped in. I watched my odometer carefully, counting off the miles. 23 miles later, the overpass appeared again. I tried to drive past without going under it. Pulled into the left lane, planning to swerve onto the shoulder at the last second. Anything to avoid passing beneath that concrete structure. But as I got close, my steering wheel locked up. Not mechanically locked, but my hands wouldn't move. My arms were frozen, holding the truck on course, driving me straight toward the overpass no matter how hard I tried to turn away. The lights went out, 2 seconds of darkness and cold. And in that darkness, the figure was closer. Not 30 feet away now, but maybe 20 feet, still standing, motionless, still with its head bowed. But I could see more details now. The dark clothes were a suit, old-fashioned looking, like something from the 1950s or 60s, and where its face should have been, there was just shadow. A darkness deeper than the surrounding darkness. The lights came back on. The figure vanished. My hands regained control of the wheel. I was breathing hard now, my heart pounding against my ribs. This wasn't electrical problems. This wasn't the storm playing tricks on me. This was something else, something impossible, and I was trapped in it. The CB radio crackled to life on its own, even though I'd turned it off. That same thumping sound filled the cab, louder now, echoing off the metal and glass. And underneath it, I could hear something else. A voice, maybe. Or wind, or water. Something that rose and fell in pitch, almost like words, but not quite. I reached for the radio to turn it off again, but before my hand touched the knob, the sound changed. Became clearer. Resolved into actual words. Stop. One word. Barely audible over the static and the thumping and the rain hammering on the roof, but clear enough that I couldn't pretend I hadn't heard it. Stop the truck. I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to keep moving, to keep driving, to get away from the overpass and the figure and whatever was happening to me out here in the storm. But the voice kept coming through the radio, getting more insistent. Stop! Stop the truck! Stop now! The fourth time I approached the overpass, I saw something that made my stomach drop. There was a light beneath it. A flashing light, red and blue, pulsing through the rain. As I got closer, I could make out more details. It was a car, a police car, parked on the shoulder beneath the overpass. The emergency lights were on, but I couldn't see anyone inside the vehicle. My first thought was relief. A cop meant help, meant another person out here, meant I wasn't alone with whatever was happening. I started to slow down, started to pull over. Then I saw the figure. It was standing next to the police car, the same tall, thin shape in the dark suit. But now its head was up, and it was looking directly at me. And where its face should have been, there was still just that deeper darkness. A void that seemed to pull at my eyes, trying to draw me in. The lights on my truck cut out. Not just for 2 seconds this time, but longer. 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 15. In the darkness, I could see the figure more clearly than I should have been able to. It was glowing faintly, a sickly green phosphorescence that outlined its shape against the black. and it was moving now, walking toward my truck with slow, deliberate steps. I fumbled for my headlight switch, flipping it on and off desperately. Nothing happened. The electrical system was completely dead. No lights, no radio, no dashboard. Even the engine had died, and I was coasting now, rolling forward under momentum alone. The figure kept coming, 20 feet, 15 feet, 10 feet. I could see its hands now, long and pale, reaching out toward my truck. Could see the way its suit hung on its frame, too loose, like it was wearing someone else's clothes. Could see that its shoes were old dress shoes, cracked and worn, and they made no sound as they hit the wet pavement. But I couldn't see its face. That void where its face should have been was absolute, a darkness so complete it hurt to look at. 5 feet away, 3 feet. The electrical system came back on all at once, everything blazing to life. Headlights, radio, engine, dashboard. The sudden roar of the diesel starting back up made me jump. And the figure was gone. The police car was gone. There was nothing beneath the overpass but concrete and shadow and rain. I gunned the engine and drove, pushing the truck faster than I should have in the storm. I didn't care anymore about making good time or meeting my delivery window. I just needed to get away from that overpass, from this stretch of highway where reality didn't work right. But I knew what was coming. I knew that 23 miles ahead, the overpass would be waiting again. The figure would be there, getting closer each time, getting more solid, getting more real. I don't know how many times I passed under that overpass. I lost count after 8 or 9. Each time, the electrical failure lasted a little longer. Each time, the figure was a little closer. Each time I could see more details that I didn't want to see. I saw that the suit it wore was waterlogged, dripping, like it had been underwater. I saw that its hands weren't quite right, the fingers too long, the knuckles bent at wrong angles. I saw that when it moved, it didn't walk so much as glide, its feet touching the ground but not quite supporting its weight. And I started to see its face, or what was underneath where its face should have been. Glimpses in the darkness, impressions more than actual images. Something wet and raw and wrong. The CB radio kept talking to me in that voice that wasn't quite human. Stop the truck, you have to stop. Stop now. Stop before it's too late. But I couldn't stop, wouldn't stop. Because I knew that if I stopped, if I got out of my truck beneath that overpass, the figure would be waiting for me, and whatever it wanted, whatever it was trying to tell me, I didn't want to hear it. The storm was getting worse. The wind was strong enough now that I could feel my trailer swaying, trying to tip. The lightning was striking so close that I could smell ozone through my air vents. And the rain was so heavy that my wipers were useless, doing nothing but smearing water back and forth across my windshield. I was starting to think I was going to die out here, that the storm would flip my truck, or I'd hydroplane off the road, or the figure beneath the overpass would finally reach me when the lights went out. One way or another, I wasn't going to make it to Little Rock. That's when I saw the other lights. Not the red and blue of a police car, but the white headlights of another vehicle. A truck coming toward me in the eastbound lanes. I flashed my lights at it frantically, trying to signal for help. The other truck flashed back. Then, as we passed each other, I saw the driver. He was waving at me, gesturing wildly, pointing ahead. His mouth was moving like he was shouting something I couldn't hear. He looked terrified, and then he was past me, disappearing into the rain behind. But seeing another person, another driver, made something click in my mind. I wasn't alone. This wasn't just happening to me. Other people had driven through this, had experienced this, had seen the overpass and the figure, which meant there had to be a way out. I checked my GPS again. I was still on I-40, still heading westbound, but the exit numbers weren't making sense anymore. They were jumping around, showing exits that didn't exist, highways that weren't on any map. I ignored the GPS, ignored the instruments, focused only on the road ahead and the white lines barely visible through the rain. The next time the overpass appeared, I didn't slow down, didn't try to avoid it. I aimed straight for it and kept my foot on the accelerator, pushing my speed up to 60 miles an hour despite the rain and wind. The lights went out. Darkness, cold. And the figure was right there, standing in my lane, directly in my path. I should have hit it, should have felt the impact, should have heard metal crunch and glass break, but there was nothing. Just darkness and cold, and the sound of my tires on wet pavement. The lights came back on. The overpass was behind me. And ahead, maybe a mile away, I could see different lights. The bright fluorescent glow of a truck stop. The familiar orange and blue of a Love's Travel Stop sign. I drove toward those lights like they were the gates of heaven. The rain was still falling. The lightning was still flashing. But the pressure in my chest was easing. The tightness in my throat was fading. I pulled into the truck stop parking lot and found a spot as close to the building as I could get. Shut off my engine and just sat there for a long time, my hands shaking so badly I couldn't unclip my seatbelt at first. Inside the truck stop, everything was normal. Drivers getting coffee, picking up snacks, talking about the storm and road conditions ahead. I bought a cup of coffee and sat at a booth in the restaurant area, trying to calm down. I called my dispatcher to check in to let him know I was running late because of the weather. He sounded confused when he answered. "Mason, I thought you already delivered that load." "What? No, I'm still on I-40, stopped at the Loves near Brinkley." There was a pause. "According to our tracking, your truck showed as arriving at the Little Rock facility 2 hours ago." "That's impossible. I've been fighting this storm for the past 3 hours. I haven't made it to Little Rock yet." Another pause, longer this time. "Hold on, let me pull up the data." I waited, drinking my coffee, watching the rain stream down the windows. He came back on the line. "This is strange. The GPS data is corrupted for the past 4 hours. It's showing you in multiple locations at once, sometimes 30 miles apart at the same time. And there's a gap in the data, about an hour and 20 minutes where the system shows no location at all." "Where was the last clear reading?" I asked, though I already knew what he was going to say. "Mile marker 32. Right around where that old overpass is." "What old overpass?" "The one they closed off after that accident. Happened about 6 years ago during a bad storm. Truck driver tried to take shelter under it when the weather got bad. Got out of his cab for some reason. They found his truck the next morning, but never found him. State closed the overpass after that, said the structure was unstable. They were supposed to tear it down, but I guess they never got around to it." "What was the date?" I asked. "When did the accident happen?" I heard keys clicking as he looked it up. "June 7th, 6 years ago." I checked my phone. June 7th. Today was June 7th. "The driver's name," I said quietly. "What was his name?" More typing. "Let's see. Here it is. Mason Tucker." The phone slipped from my hand, clattered on the table. The dispatcher's voice kept coming from the speaker, tinny and distant, asking if I was still there, if I was okay, but I couldn't answer. I was staring at my hands, at my clothes, at my reflection in the dark window, looking for some sign that I was real, that I was alive, that I wasn't the figure standing beneath that overpass in the rain. I don't remember leaving the truck stop. Don't remember getting back in my truck or finishing the drive to Little Rock. My next clear memory is of sitting in my truck at the delivery facility, watching the sun come up, the storm long gone. I completed the delivery, filed my logs, took my next load. Kept driving because that's what you do. That's what we do. But I never drive I-40 through that stretch of Arkansas anymore. I take Highway 67, add an extra hour to the trip, burn more fuel. Don't care. I'll never drive past mile marker 32 again. Because I know what's waiting there. I know what stands beneath that overpass in the rain, wearing an old suit and watching for trucks that pass in the night. I know what it wants. It wants to not be alone. And sometimes, late at night when storms roll through, I wonder if I left something of myself beneath that overpass. If part of me is still trapped there, still driving through that same stretch of road over and over, still seeing the lights cut out and the figure getting closer. Or if all of me is trapped there, and what's driving this truck, what's living this life, is just an echo, a ghost that doesn't know it's dead, still making deliveries, still running routes, still trying to get somewhere it will never reach. The storm took something from me that night. I don't know if it was my peace of mind or something more fundamental. But I know I'm different now. I know that when I look in mirrors, sometimes I have to look twice to make sure I can still see my reflection. And I know that somewhere on I-40 in Arkansas, there's an overpass that shouldn't exist anymore. And beneath it, in the rain and darkness, something is still waiting, still watching, still looking for the next truck that drives past on the wrong night, in the wrong storm, at the wrong time. I hope whoever drives past next keeps going. I hope they don't stop. I hope they make it through to the other side. But I know some of them won't. And on June 7th of every year, when the storms roll through Arkansas, I stay off the road. I park my truck and I wait for the day to pass. Because that's the anniversary. That's when it happened. And that's when the overpass is hungriest. The loneliest part of trucking isn't the hours by yourself or the miles of empty highway. It's knowing that even when you're surrounded by other drivers, you're still fundamentally alone. We pass each other on the road, talk on the CB, maybe share a cup of coffee at a truck stop. But at the end of the day, you're in your cab and they're in theirs, and you're all just strangers rolling through the night in the same direction. That's why when you find a convoy, when you fall in with a group of drivers heading the same way at the same speed, it feels different. Feels like companionship, like brotherhood. Feels like you're part of something instead of just alone with your thoughts and your freight. I learned the hard way that sometimes that feeling is an illusion, and sometimes the people you think you're traveling with aren't really there at all. My name is Hunter Mathis. I've been driving long haul for 11 years, mostly running routes through the Great Plains states: Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, the Dakotas. Big sky country where the roads run straight for 100 miles and the horizon seems to go on forever. It's beautiful in its own way, all that space and emptiness, but it can mess with your head if you're not careful. Make you see things that aren't there. Make you hear voices in the static. Or so I thought. It was late April, a Tuesday night. I was hauling a load of farm equipment from Omaha to Oklahoma City, taking Highway 81 south through the heart of the plains. It's not the fastest route, but I prefer it to the interstate. Less traffic, better scenery, and plenty of small towns along the way if you need to stop for fuel or food. I'd left Omaha around 4 in the afternoon, planning to drive through the night and make my delivery by morning. The weather was perfect. Clear skies, mild temperature, no wind, the kind of night that makes you glad you chose this profession. Around 9:30, just as I was crossing from Nebraska into Kansas, I heard a voice on the CB, Channel 19, the main trucker channel. Southbound traffic on Highway 81, this is Dakota Red and the Blue Peterbilt. Any other trucks heading toward the Oklahoma line tonight? I picked up my handset. Dakota Red, this is Omaha Hunter and the White Freightliner, about 10 miles north of your position, heading to Oklahoma City with farm equipment. Copy that, Omaha Hunter. I got a load of cattle feed going to Enid. You want some company for the ride? I smiled. Wouldn't mind it at all. Been a quiet night so far. Well, it just got less quiet. We got a couple more trucks with us. There's Tulsa Mike and a green Kenworth about 5 miles behind you, and Colorado Sam and a red International about 3 miles ahead of me. We're all running about the same speed, so we figured we'd convoy down together. A convoy. 4 trucks, all heading south on Highway 81, all keeping pace with each other through the night. It sounded good to me. I'd been driving solo since Omaha, and the company would help keep me alert. Sounds like a plan, Dakota Red. I'm at mile marker 214. What's your position? Mile marker 204. Should catch up to you in about 15 minutes at this speed. I settled back in my seat, feeling better than I had all day. There's something reassuring about knowing there are other drivers nearby, people who understand what you're doing and why you're doing it. We might all be strangers, but we're strangers who share the same road, the same challenges, the same late-night miles. Over the next hour, the convoy formed up naturally. Colorado Sam was in the lead, about a half-mile ahead of me. I was second in line. Dakota Red was third, maybe a quarter-mile behind me. And Tulsa Mike was bringing up the rear, another quarter-mile back. We spread out enough to be safe, close enough to feel connected. The conversation on the CB was easy and comfortable. We talked about the usual things. Road conditions ahead, fuel prices, which truck stops had the best coffee, complaints about dispatchers and delivery schedules. Colorado. Sam told a long story about getting stuck in a snowstorm in Wyoming the previous winter. I was hauling electronics through the mountains, he said, his gravelly voice warm with the memory. Weather report said light snow, maybe an inch or two. Well, light snow turned into a full-blown blizzard. Couldn't see 10 feet in front of me. I pulled over at this little truck stop, thought I'd wait it out for a few hours. Ended up being stuck there for 3 days. 3 days? Tulsa Mike sounded amazed. What did you do all that time? Played poker with 5 other drivers who got stuck there with me. Lost $200 the first night. Won it all back, plus another 100 by the 3rd day. By the time they cleared the roads, we'd all become pretty good friends. Still keep in touch with a couple of them. Dakota Red laughed. That's the thing about this job. You never know when you're going to make a friend or lose your shirt in a card game. Sometimes both, I added. The conversation shifted to families. Colorado Sam talked about his daughter's upcoming wedding, how he was trying to save up enough to pay for a decent reception. His voice got softer when he talked about her, full of pride and love. She's marrying a good man, he said. Met him at college. He's got a job lined up at an engineering firm in Denver. They're going to have a good life. Better than this, anyway. He paused. Not that there's anything wrong with trucking. It's been good to me, but I want better for her, you know? That's every parent's dream, Dakota Red said. My boy's in high school now, smart kid, wants to be a doctor. I told him I'd do whatever it takes to get him through medical school, even if it means driving until I'm 80. Tulsa Mike was quieter during this part of the conversation. When someone asked about his family, he hesitated before answering. Don't have much family left, he finally said. My folks passed when I was young. Got a sister in Texas, but we don't talk much. That's part of why I like this job. Don't have much tying me down anywhere. Road feels more like home than any apartment I've ever rented. There was something lonely in his voice that made my chest tighten. I knew that feeling. The freedom of the road could be exhilarating, but it could also be isolating. You could go weeks without a meaningful conversation with anyone, without any real connection. Well, you got us tonight, Colorado. Sam said gently, we're your convoy family for the next few hundred miles. Convoy family. Tulsa Mike repeated, and I could hear the smile in his voice. I like that. We talked about places we'd been, the strangest loads we'd ever hauled. Dakota Red told us about the time he'd transported a circus elephant from Florida to Montana, and how the elephant had somehow managed to unlock its trailer door at a rest area and go wandering around the parking lot at 3 a.m. State trooper shows up, Dakota Red said. Sees this elephant just standing there next to the vending machines, and radios for backup. By the time I got the elephant back in the trailer, there were 6 patrol cars and an animal control unit. Made the local news. My dispatcher was not happy. We all laughed, and the conversation flowed easily from one topic to another. I found myself telling stories I hadn't thought about in years, sharing parts of my life with these strangers like they were old friends. There was something about the darkness, the isolation, the shared experience of the highway that made it easy to open up. Tulsa Mike talked about his dream of saving enough money to buy a small house somewhere quiet, maybe near the mountains. Nothing fancy, he said. Just a place where I can park my truck and know it's mine. No, I'm not just passing through. You'll get there, I told him. Keep at it, save your money, and you'll get there. You think so? I know so. Around 11:15, we passed through a town called Caldwell. The streetlights created a brief corridor of illumination, and I could see Colorado Sam's blue Peterbilt ahead of me more clearly. It was an older model, but well-maintained, the chrome catching the light. Behind me, I caught glimpses of Dakota Red's truck in my mirrors, and further back, Tulsa Mike's headlights. We were real. All of us. 4 trucks moving through the night in formation. 4 drivers who'd found each other on a lonely highway and decided to travel together for a while. It felt good. It felt right. They felt real. Their voices, their stories, their personalities. Colorado Sam had a deep, gravelly voice and laughed a lot. Dakota Red spoke with a slight southern accent and liked to give advice about routes and shortcuts. Tulsa Mike was younger sounding, more energetic, always asking questions. Around 11 o'clock, we passed through a small town called Caldwell. The lights of the town were a brief interruption in the darkness, and then we were back out into open country. Fields on both sides of the highway, the occasional farmhouse light visible in the distance, and above us, a sky full of stars so bright and clear it almost hurt to look at them. Beautiful night, Colorado Sam said over the CB. Nights like this remind me why I love this job. Amen to that, Dakota Red replied. You can't get skies like this in the city. Too much light pollution. Out here you can see the whole universe laid out above you. Speaking of which, Tulsa Mike said, anybody else notice how few cars we're seeing tonight? I think maybe 5 vehicles have passed us going north in the last hour. He was right. Traffic was unusually light, even for a Tuesday night on a secondary highway. But that wasn't necessarily strange. This part of Kansas is sparsely populated, and it was getting late. Fewer cars means safer driving, I said. I'll take an empty highway over a crowded one any day. The conversation drifted to other topics. Families back home, places we'd been, loads we'd hauled. I learned that Colorado Sam had a daughter getting married in June. Dakota Red was saving up to buy his own truck and stop driving for someone else. Tulsa Mike was new to trucking, only been doing it for about a year, still learning the ropes. They felt like friends, like people I'd known for years instead of just a couple of hours. That's the strange intimacy of the CB radio. You can form connections with people you've never met, build relationships based on nothing more than voices in the night. Around midnight, the weather started to change. I noticed fog appearing in patches, lying in the low spots beside the highway. At first, it was just wisps, barely enough to reduce visibility, but over the next 30 minutes, it got thicker. Looks like we're driving into some fog, Colorado Sam said. "Everybody stay alert, keep your speed down and your eyes on the road." "Roger that," Dakota Red replied. "It's coming up fast too. Wasn't expecting weather like this tonight." The fog got heavier. It rolled across the highway in waves, sometimes thick enough that I could only see about 100 feet ahead. I slowed down to 50 miles an hour, and I could see the other trucks doing the same. "This is getting pretty thick," Tulsa Mike said. His voice sounded worried. "Maybe we should pull over and wait for it to clear." "It's just fog," Dakota Red replied. "Nothing we haven't driven through before. Just keep your distance from the truck ahead of you and you'll be fine." But something about this fog felt different. It wasn't just the thickness or the way it seemed to appear out of nowhere. There was something about the quality of it, the way it moved. It didn't drift naturally with air currents. It seemed to pulse, to breathe, to move with purpose. "Anybody else notice how quiet it got?" Colorado Sam asked. "My radio just lost all the stations. Can't get anything but static." I checked my own radio. He was right. Every station was dead, just white noise. Even the CB seemed to have a strange quality to it, like the voices were coming from further away than they should. "Yeah, I'm getting the same thing," I confirmed. "Might be the fog interfering with the signals somehow." "Fog doesn't do that," Tulsa Mike said. There was an edge to his voice now, something beyond worry, something closer to fear. "I don't like this. I really don't like this." "Easy there, kid," Dakota Red said. "You're working yourself up over nothing. It's just weather. Just stay calm and keep driving." The fog kept getting worse. Within another 15 minutes, visibility was down to maybe 50 feet. I could barely see Colorado Sam's taillights ahead of me, and when I checked my mirrors, I could only occasionally catch a glimpse of Dakota Red's headlights behind me. The world had narrowed to just my cab, my headlights, and a small moving circle of visibility. Everything beyond that was swallowed by thick, gray nothing that pressed against my windshield like something alive. My hands were tight on the wheel, and I realized I was leaning forward in my seat, as if getting a few inches closer to the windshield would somehow help me see better. It didn't. "Colorado." "Sam, you still ahead of me?" I called on the CB. A pause. Then his voice came back, but it sounded strange, distant and hollow, like he was speaking from the bottom of a well. "Still here, Hunter. Can barely see my own hood, though. This is some of the worst fog I've ever driven through." "Dakota Red, Tulsa Mike. You guys doing okay back there?" More static. Then Dakota Red's voice also sounding far away and distorted. "We're here. Visibility is for shit, but we're managing." "Tulsa Mike?" Nothing but static. "Tulsa Mike, you copy?" More static. Then, faintly, almost lost in the noise, "Can't see anything. Mike, you need to slow down more. If you can't see, don't push it." No response. I tried to focus on the road, on keeping my truck between the white lines that I could barely see. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. This wasn't just fog. This was something else. The temperature in my cab had dropped. I hadn't touched the climate controls, but I could see my breath now. Small white clouds forming with each exhale. The windows were starting to fog up on the inside, and I had to crank up the defroster. "Is anybody else getting cold?" I asked over the CB. Static, no response. "Colorado Sam, Dakota Red," nothing. I was alone with the fog and the highway and the silence. The CB was still on, still showing active, but all I could hear was that endless static punctuated by occasional pops and crackles that almost sounded like words if you listened hard enough. I drove for what felt like an eternity. Time seemed to stretch and compress strangely in the fog. I'd look at my clock and see that only 2 minutes had passed, then look again and see that 20 minutes were gone. My odometer was rolling over mile after mile, but I couldn't tell if I was actually covering that distance or if the numbers were just changing on their own. The fog began to take on shapes. Shadows moved within it, forms that looked almost human for a brief moment before dissolving back into gray nothing. I told myself it was just my tired eyes, just patterns my brain was trying to impose on the chaos. But the shapes kept appearing, kept moving alongside my truck, pacing me. Once, I could have sworn I saw a face pressed against my passenger window, just for a split second. A pale face with dark eyes, looking in at me with an expression I couldn't read. Then it was gone, and there was only fog. "This isn't right," I said out loud, just to hear my own voice, to remind myself I was still real. None of this is right. The CB conversation had stopped. We were all too focused on driving to talk. The only sounds were the rumble of my engine, the hiss of my tires on wet pavement, and the occasional crackle of static from the radio. I don't know how long we drove through that fog. It felt like hours, but it was probably only 30 or 40 minutes. The world had shrunk down to just my headlights and the small patch of highway I could see, everything else swallowed by thick gray nothing. Then, gradually, the fog started to thin. I could see further ahead, could make out the shapes of trees beside the road, could see stars appearing overhead as the fog cleared. I looked for Colorado Sam's taillights. They weren't there. I checked my mirrors for Dakota Red's headlights. Nothing. The highway ahead of me and behind me was completely empty. I grabbed my CB handset. "Colorado Sam, you copy? Where'd you go?" Static. No response. "Dakota Red, Tulsa Mike, anybody out there?" More static. The channel was completely dead. I checked my GPS. I was still on Highway 81, still heading south, right where I should be. But according to my odometer, I'd somehow covered 70 miles since the last time I'd checked, which should have taken over an hour at the speed I'd been going. But it didn't feel like I'd been driving for an hour. I scanned through all the CB channels, calling out for the other trucks. Nothing. It was like they'd never existed. The fog was completely gone now, and the sky was clear again. But the highway was empty. No other trucks, no cars, nothing. I drove for another hour without seeing a single vehicle in either direction. Around 2 in the morning, I pulled off the highway at a truck stop in Wichita. It was a big TA, the kind of place that's always busy no matter what time of day or night. But when I pulled into the lot, there were only a handful of trucks parked there, and the place had a quiet, almost abandoned feel to it. I sat in my truck for a few minutes before getting out, just trying to calm my nerves. My hands were still shaking from the drive through the fog. I kept telling myself it was nothing, just weather and tired eyes and an overactive imagination. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had happened out there in the fog, something I didn't understand. I went inside and poured myself a cup of coffee from the self-serve station. The clerk at the counter was an older woman, probably in her 60s, reading a paperback novel. She had gray hair pulled back in a bun and reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. "Quiet night," I said, trying to make conversation, trying to hear another human voice and confirm that I was still in the real world. She looked up and shrugged. "They're all quiet lately. Used to be this place was packed every night. Now we're lucky if we get 10 trucks." She marked her place in the book and set it down. "You look like you've had a rough drive. Everything okay?" "Just came through some heavy fog. Made me a little jumpy, I guess." "Fog'll do that. Makes you see things that aren't there." She studied me more carefully. "You sure you're all right? You look pale." I took a sip of coffee, trying to warm myself up from the inside. I was traveling with a convoy. 4 trucks, all heading south together. We were talking on the CB, keeping each other company. Then we hit the fog and I trailed off, not sure how to explain what had happened. They just disappeared. All three of the other trucks. Gone like they'd never been there. The woman's expression changed. Got more serious, more concerned. Where exactly were you driving? Highway 81, southbound from Nebraska. She was quiet for a moment. And these other drivers, did they tell you their names? Their handles? Yeah, there was Colorado Sam, Dakota Red, and Tulsa Mike. Good guys. Felt like I'd known them for years, even though we'd just met tonight. The color drained from her face. She stood up slowly, her hand bracing against the counter like she needed support. Oh, honey, oh no. Come sit down, let me get you some water. What? What is it? She came around the counter and guided me to a booth, then brought me a glass of ice water. Her hands were shaking slightly as she set it down. She sat across from me, and I could see genuine worry in her eyes. How long you been driving truck? She asked. 11 years? Why? And you've never heard the story about Highway 81, about the convoy that disappeared? A cold feeling was spreading through my chest. No. What story? She took a deep breath. It was 9 years ago, April 24th. There was a convoy of 4 trucks heading south on Highway 81, all keeping in contact on the CB. They were all talking and laughing, just like you described. Then they ran into a fog bank. None of them ever came out the other side. What do you mean, never came out? I mean, they vanished. The State Patrol got calls from people reporting a weird fog on Highway 81, said it came out of nowhere and didn't act like normal fog. When it cleared, those 4 trucks were gone. They found one of them abandoned about 60 miles south of where the fog hit, but no sign of the driver. The other 3 trucks never turned up at all. Neither did any of the drivers. My coffee cup was rattling against the saucer. I set it down before I spilled it. That's impossible. I was just talking to them. They were real. I heard their voices, heard their stories about their families, and what were their names? She asked gently. Tell me again. Colorado Sam. He had a daughter getting married. Dakota Red had a son who wanted to be a doctor. And Tulsa Mike, he was young, didn't have much family, wanted to buy a house somewhere quiet. She nodded slowly. Sam Cordova. He did have a daughter. She was planning a wedding for that summer. Danny Redding, Dakota Red, he had a son in high school at the time. And Mike Sutton, Tulsa Mike. Youngest of the group, only been trucking for about a year. You knew them? They all stopped here regular. This was one of their favorite places to fuel up, grab coffee, rest for a bit. Sam liked the breakfast burritos. Danny always ordered pie, said we had the best cherry pie in Kansas. And Mike, her voice caught slightly. Mike always asked me about my day, always wanted to know how I was doing, made sure I was okay. Sweet kid. All of them were good people. Past tense, I whispered. You're talking about them in past tense. They've been gone 9 years, honey. Whatever you talked to out there in the fog, she shook her head. I don't know what it was, but it wasn't them, not really. Not anymore. I felt like the floor was tilting beneath me. There was a 4th driver. The one they found the abandoned truck for. What was his name? She looked down at her hands. I don't remember. It was 9 years ago, and there were so many news stories at the time, so many names. She stood up. Wait here. I kept some of the newspaper articles from back then. I think I still have them in the office. She disappeared into the back and returned a few minutes later with a folder full of yellowed newspaper clippings. She spread them out on the table between us. 4 truckers vanish in mysterious fog, one headline read. Below it was a photograph of the 4 men. I recognized them immediately from the descriptions they'd given of themselves. Colorado Sam, with his gravelly voice, older, weathered face. Dakota Red, solid and dependable looking. Tulsa Mike, young and eager. And the fourth driver, the one whose truck had been found abandoned. I stared at his photograph for a long time before I could make myself read the caption beneath it. Hunter Mathis, 38, of Omaha, Nebraska. The photograph showed a man who looked exactly like the person I saw in the mirror every morning. "That can't be right," I said. My voice sounded far away, like someone else was speaking. "That's me. That's my name. That's my face." The woman was looking at me with a mixture of pity and fear. "What year do you think it is?" she asked quietly. I pulled out my phone to show her, to prove to her that I was real, that this was now, not 9 years ago. But when I looked at the screen, the date was wrong. It showed April 24th, 9 years in the past. "No," I said, "no, that's just a glitch. My phone needs to be reset or something. What was the date when you started your run today?" I couldn't answer because I knew. I'd known since she started telling me the story, but I hadn't wanted to accept it. "Check your cargo paperwork," she said gently. "Check your logbook." With shaking hands, I pulled out my documents. The load I was hauling, farm equipment from Omaha to Oklahoma City. The date on the paperwork was April 24th, 9 years ago. My logbook showed the same date. I looked up at her, and I could see my own fear reflected in her eyes. What happened to me? What happened to us? I don't know, honey. Nobody knows. But every year on April 24th, the fog comes back. And every year, we hear reports of drivers who claim they talked to the convoy on their CB. Sometimes they join you. Sometimes they make it through. But the fog is always there, waiting. So I couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't say the word. "I think you're caught between," she said. "Between what was and what is. Between living and—" She stopped. "I'm so sorry." I stood up, needing to move, needing to do something. There has to be a way out. There has to be a way to break the loop, to get back to the real world. If there is, nobody's found it yet. The convoy drives south on Highway 81 every April 24th. The fog comes, and the four of you, she gestured helplessly, you keep going. Maybe I had. Maybe I'd been traveling with four ghosts all night, talking with them on the CB, listening to their stories, feeling like I'd found friends on the lonely highway. Or maybe I was the ghost. Maybe I'd driven into that fog 9 years ago and never come out. Maybe I was the one who disappeared, and what I thought was my life now was just an echo, a loop, driving the same stretch of road over and over, meeting the same people, having the same conversations. I thanked the woman. I never even got her name, and went back to my truck. Sat in the cab for a long time, trying to decide what to do, trying to understand what I was. I pulled out my logbook and checked the date I'd written when I started this run. April 24th, 9 years ago. I looked at my cargo paperwork, same date. I checked my fuel receipts, my delivery orders, everything. All of it dated 9 years in the past. I looked in the rearview mirror, studying my face. I looked the same as I always did. Same eyes, same weathered skin, same gray starting to show at my temples. I didn't look dead, didn't feel dead. But what did dead feel like? What did being a ghost feel like? I thought about my daughter, the one I'd been working to put through college. She'd be, 27 now? 28? All grown up, living her life. Probably not even thinking about her father who disappeared 9 years ago on a foggy night in Kansas. Did she mourn me? Did she move on? Was there a grave somewhere with my name on it, even though they never found my body? I started the engine, and the familiar rumble of the diesel felt real enough. The steering wheel felt solid in my hands. The CB radio crackled with static that sounded exactly like static always sounds. Everything felt real. Maybe that was the cruelty of it. That we didn't know we were dead. That we just kept driving, kept living out the same night over and over, thinking each time that it was real. That we were alive, that we had futures ahead of us. I pulled back onto Highway 81 and drove south, because what else could I do? Where else could I go? This was my route. This was my night. This was all I had, even if it was just an echo of something that had happened 9 years ago. As I drove, I thought about the conversations we'd had. Colorado Sam talking about his daughter's wedding. Dakota Red talking about his son's dreams of medical school. Tulsa Mike wanting to buy a house somewhere quiet. Had those things happened? Had Sam's daughter gotten married? Had Dakota Red's son become a doctor? Or had all of those futures died in the fog with us, leaving only memories of what might have been? The highway stretched ahead of me, empty and dark. The stars overhead were the same stars I'd seen 9 years ago, unchanged, eternal. But I was the one out of time, the one who didn't belong anymore in the world of the living. Maybe that's what hell was. Not fire and brimstone, but this. An endless loop of the last night you were alive, driving forever toward a destination you'll never reach. Making friends with people who are just as lost as you are. All of you trapped in a moment that keeps repeating. The CB crackled to life, and I heard Dakota Red's voice, exactly as I'd heard it at the beginning of the night. Southbound traffic on Highway 81. This is Dakota Red in the blue Peterbilt. Any other trucks heading toward the Oklahoma line tonight? It was starting again. The loop was resetting. We were going back to the beginning, back to the moment before we knew we were lost. I picked up the handset, and I heard myself answer, even though I didn't want to. Even though I knew now what was waiting for us in the fog. The words came out automatically, like they were programmed into me. Dakota Red, this is Omaha Hunter in the white Freightliner, about 10 miles north of your position, heading to Oklahoma City with farm equipment. Copy that, Omaha Hunter. I got a load of cattle feed going to Enid. You want some company for the ride? I wanted to say no. Wanted to warn him. Wanted to scream at him that we were already dead, that this was a loop, that the fog was coming and it would take us again. But I couldn't. The loop wouldn't let me. Wouldn't mind it at all, I heard myself say. Been a quiet night so far, and so it starts again. The convoy forms up. Colorado Sam in the lead, telling his story about the snowstorm in Wyoming. Me second, listening and laughing and feeling like I've found friends. Dakota Red third, talking about his son. Tulsa Mike bringing up the rear, lonely and glad for the company. We talk about weather and roads and families and dreams. We feel real. We feel alive. And none of us remember that we've done this before, that we're caught in a loop, that we're driving through a night that ended 9 years ago. But somewhere deep inside, in a place where memories can't quite be erased, I know. I know that the fog is coming. I know what will happen when we drive into it. I know that we'll disappear again, and the cycle will repeat. And somewhere in the real world, April 24th will come around again, and we'll be out here driving and disappearing and starting over. And I know that sometimes real drivers join us. Living drivers who hear Dakota Red's voice on the CB and think they're just talking to another trucker. Drivers who don't realize they're talking to ghosts until it's too late. The fog is ahead now. I can see it on the horizon, rolling across the highway in thick gray waves. Colorado Sam is commenting on it, telling everyone to stay alert. Dakota Red is saying it's nothing we haven't seen before. Tulsa Mike is getting nervous. And I'm driving toward it, helpless to stop, helpless to turn around. Because This is my fate. This is what I am now. A ghost, driving through an endless April 24th, making the same journey over and over, never reaching the end. The CB crackles. A new voice, one that doesn't belong to the convoy, a living voice. Southbound traffic on Highway 81. This is Denver Dale in a white Kenworth. Is anybody out there? I pick up the handset. I know I shouldn't. I know that if I answer, I'll be drawing him into the fog, making him part of our convoy, condemning him to the same fate that took us. I know it's wrong, but I can't help it. The loneliness is too much. The need for company, for one more voice in the darkness, for someone to share this endless night with us is too strong. The words come out before I can stop them. Denver Dale, this is Omaha Hunter in the white Freightliner. We got a convoy heading south if you want to join up. There's a pause. I can hear him thinking about it, weighing the loneliness of driving solo against the comfort of having company. I know what he'll choose before he says it. Sounds good, Omaha Hunter. I could use the company. And just like that, the convoy grows. 4 ghosts and 1 living driver, all heading south on Highway 81, all talking and laughing and sharing the road, all driving into the fog that's waiting ahead. I want to warn him, want to tell him to turn around, to get off this highway to avoid Highway 81 on April 24th for the rest of his life. But the loop won't let me. I can only watch as he falls into our pattern, becomes part of our doomed convoy. The fog swallows us. One by one, we disappear into that gray nothing. And somewhere in the fog, we forget again. We forget that we're dead. We forget that this is a loop. We forget everything except the road ahead and the friends we're traveling with. And when the fog clears, when morning comes in the real world and April 25th begins, we're gone. Back to wherever ghosts go when they're not driving. Back to the spaces between moments waiting for next year's April 24th to come around and pull us back onto Highway 81. I'm sorry, Denver Dale. I'm so sorry I answered your call. I'm sorry I pulled you into this nightmare. I'm sorry you'll spend eternity driving with us, trapped in a night that never ends. But I was so lonely, and you sounded so alive. And for just a moment, I wanted to feel alive too, even if it meant dooming you to this endless repetition. The fog closes in. Visibility drops to nothing, and I can feel the memory slipping away already. Feel myself forgetting the truth I learned at that truck stop. By the time the fog clears, I'll remember nothing. I'll just be Hunter Mathis, driving south on Highway 81, hauling farm equipment to Oklahoma City, traveling with my convoy family of Colorado Sam and Dakota Red, and Tulsa Mike and Denver Dale. And it will feel real. It will feel like life. Until the moment it doesn't. Until the moment someone else learns the truth and the cycle begins again. We're all still out here, somewhere on Highway 81 between Nebraska and Oklahoma. All the drivers who disappeared over the years, all the convoys that vanished into the fog. We're still driving, still talking on the CB, still looking for the truck stops and destinations we'll never reach. April 24th never ends for us. The fog never clears, not really. We just keep driving and driving and driving, trapped in the last night we were alive, chasing taillights that vanish and following roads that loop back on themselves. If you're ever driving Highway 81 late at night, and you hear a voice on Channel 19 asking if anybody wants to convoy, think twice before you answer. Listen to the quality of the voice, the way it sounds just slightly off, like it's coming from underwater or from a great distance. That's us. That's the convoy. And if you answer, if you join us, then you're driving toward the fog too. And once you enter that fog, you might not come out the other side. Or if you do, it might not be in the same year you entered it. The road goes on forever for us. The same stretches of highway, the same conversations, the same doomed journey south. And every year, on April 24th, the fog comes back, and we come back with it.